Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. Here I am on Sloane Square in London. So we're just inside the uber fashionable borough of Chelsea. Of course, Chelsea these days is amalgamated with Kensington to be the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. I think as Kensington Palace is in the borough. Anyhow, so this video is about the rise and fall of the Sloane Ranger. So Sloanes were a sociological phenomenon who were discovered in the late 1970s. Having said that, there have really been Sloanes in all eras throughout recorded history. But they're probably the grandparents of the Sloanes were the bright young things of the Roaring Twenties. You might know that Evelyn Waugh novel Vile Bodies, or indeed the film from about 2000 entitled Bright Young Things, even the educational agency Bright Young Things. But anyway, so Sloanes, who were they? They were really, they were aristocrats or wealthy upper middle class youngsters who would hang around Sloane Square, this general area, Chelsea, the King's Road. I'll show you the King's Road. If you go dead ahead, that's the King's Road, that's corner. We might walk a bit closer to it. So you may have heard of Made in Chelsea. Well, the Sloanes were really the parents of the Made in Chelsea set. What else am I going to point out? So people just call them Sloane Rangers or Sloanes, Sloanies, things like that. So they were at their zenith in the early 80s. Princess Diana was more or less the queen of the Sloanes. And I remember even in the mid-90s people referring to Sloanes and Sloanies, but it was a word which fell out of use by the millennium. So Sloanes, they would usually live in London, have a pied-à-terre here, the home counties. They might have a house in another part of the United Kingdom like Northern Ireland, Yorkshire or somewhere. They went to public school. They tended to be unintellectual, perhaps not quite anti-intellectual, not terribly cultured, unpretentious. They might be a little bit into field sports, and they weren't totally urban. Somewhat sophisticated. I suppose they cared about their clothing. They had no academic pretensions, as I say, so they might work in public relations, in banking, insurance brokerage, as stockbrokers, things like that. If there's a lady, she might be a PA in something very respectable, a very snooty outfit. They might be army officers, almost never in the RAF, or I wouldn't say the Royal Navy. So that's who the Sloanes were. Their politics, I mean, they weren't terribly political, but they would lean towards the Conservative Party, certainly, mainly for economic reasons, not very ideological. So fairly superficial people, a bit Epicurean. That was the Sloanes. They wouldn't be religious. They'd often be nominal members of the Church of England, or perhaps rather than C of E, they might have been C and E, Christmas and Easter. So that was that. And they were uniformly white. Not that I think they were racist. There was a bit of racism around in British society generally then, but I don't think they were worse in this regard than the generality of people. But put it this way, I can't think of a Sloane who wasn't white, but there's no rule to say that you had to be. They, so far as I know, they were all heterosexual, but also we're looking back to the early 80s when attitudes were very different and homosexuality, though legal, was very much frowned upon. So that was them. They might be slightly close-mindedly patriotic. They wouldn't be averse to going on holiday to France. You know, Val d'Isère, that famous alpine ski resort, was jocularly known as Val de Sloane Square in the early 90s. They might go to Switzerland, especially the young ladies go to finishing school in Switzerland. So that was them. Quite a few of them been to university. Bear in mind, third level education wasn't as ubiquitous in the early 80s as it is today. So take this statistic, put it in your pipe and smoke it. When Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister in 1979, only 10% of young Britishers went to university. That's now about 40%. Now, admittedly, there was other third level education in the early 80s that wasn't university. There were plenty of polytechnics. You could do various qualifications, including a bachelor's degree, but a polytechnic would not award higher than a BA. So, as I say, a lot of them would simply leave school and go into jobs straight away, working in a business or whatever, or being army officers. So that was them. Sloanies, Sloane Rangers, not averse to taking drugs. Sometimes they're called RAs, but RAs were a broader set, as in posh people really of any age group. So they were the Sloanes. So they go shopping here. You can see there are many fine eateries. Colbert over there. In 1998 used to be called the Oriel Restaurant. I don't know what it is now. Sloane Square Hotel with Tonteria Côte Brasserie, as in a brewery in French. I don't really know if they have one. There's Sloane Square Tube Station right here. There's a church you can't see behind that building. What else? This leads onto Sloane Street with many really boutiques there. Hackett's selling very wearable clothes. They're not just suits, gentlemen's suits generally. Tiffany & Co, various jewelers, and that leads up to Knightsbridge. Then there is Harvey Nichols and Harrods. So these are really upscale department stores. What else? There's a branch of Tony & Guy if you need your follicles clipped behind you. Does that only do women's hair? I'm not sure. It's not barbers anyway. We're not very far from the Royal Horticultural Society, where the Chelsea Flower Show takes place every May, but you have to book in advance, and it costs an arm and a leg. There are last-minute tickets in case they're cancellations. I've never managed to get them myself. So they would do the season. The season runs from probably from late March up to the end of August. The season, when did it emerge? Maybe in the 18th century, but there are various other events which were then included in it. The season is a series of social events for British upper class, really. Middle class, working class can participate in some of them. Things like the University Boat Race, which is Palm Sunday. You might not be rowing, only 16 of them are rowing. Loads of people are watching. What other things are there? You could, Glorious Goodwood, the horse race. Chelsea Flower Show, well, probably the 4th of June at Eton, the Eton Harrow match. Maybe the varsity match at cricket at Lords, that's the English National Cricket Stadium. Various other things. Henley Royal Regatta, last weekend of June. Ascot, middle of June. That's the Royal Week at Ascot when the Queen goes. And I can't think of anything else. Woodhamine Cows Week in August. Cowes, C-O-W-E-S, on the Isle of Wight. That's off the southern coast of England. And that's a regatta, a yachting regatta in August, was at the height of its popularity in the late 19th century. Edward VII went a lot. He was then Prince of Wales. The British royal family was very much into all matters nautical back then. But obviously in the 20th century, people started to go on holiday further afield. That declined in popularity. I'm not even aware it still exists. So other things about Sloane's is dead ahead. You can see that not very beautiful building. That's Peter Jones, which just sells clothes really, but loads of school uniforms, few household items, a few items of furniture, white goods, shoes, and comestibles. So they often would have been going into Peter Jones to get their clothes. So as I say, dead ahead is the King's Road. Notice it's never King's Road, always the King's Road, so that they could go from where was it? Well, Buckingham House or Kensington Palace, somewhere like that, down towards Chiswick and beyond, down in the direction of Kew. And that area is now Chelsea. That was a wilderness in the 17th century. The 18th century began to be built up with still vegetable gardens well into the early 19th century. But that was the King's Road because he had it upgraded and so that we were smoother ride in his horse-drawn carriage. But anyway, it's quite low rise along there. A lovely shopping area, but the Sloanes would be strutting their stuff up and down the King's Road. I remember it referred to a lot in the 90s. And the Duke of York Barracks was there. Some of the Sloanes would be in the Territorial Army. Duke of York's Barracks no longer exists. It's just open to the public, just turned into various shop units. The Duke of York being the second son of the monarch. Current one is Prince Andrew. But anyway, the Territorial Army is part-time army. You do your ordinary job as a shop assistant, an accountant, a taxi driver, a cook, whatever, and one evening a week do military training, one weekend a monthly military training, a 2-week camp once a year, and if there ever is a war you can be called away from your ordinary job. That's a Territorial Army. So there's a Territorial Army barracks down there. Anyway, so this was the spiritual home of the Sloanes, but as I say, the Made in Chelsea set, these sort of very fashionable, self-conscious, self-indulgent young people, or very affluent, they are the new generation of Sloanes. So that's them. So